The light from the crystal chandelier, reflected off the wine glasses, stung my eyes. The air was thick with the sense of expensive perfume and the aroma of grilled steak. This was the grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, the most upscale hotel in downtown San Francisco, surrounded by tech elites in bespoke suits and impeccably made-up socialites. And I, Cole Sterling, was the only person there wearing a cheap, out-of-season suit from a department store. I carried a tray piled high with half-empty champagne glasses. My official job is as an intern in the R&D department of Carter Technologies, but at this glamorous charity gala tonight, I felt more like a waiter at everyone's beck and call. All eyes were on me, filled with undisguised mockery and contempt. Those project managers who usually treated me with disrespect at work were now huddled together in small groups, their laughter dripping with malice, their glasses gleaming. Look at that intern. I really don't know how HR even approved his resume. Dressed like that. He dares to sneak into this kind of place. He's completely disgraced our company. It was Brian, the administrative director, who was looking at me sideways, as if I were a fly that had fallen into soup. Victoria is really something. This kind of poor kid who climbed up from the bottom should be kept in the basement writing code. Bringing him out is just humiliating him. I didn't speak, but silently tightened my grip on the tray. The Victoria Brian mentioned was Victoria Carter, the founder and CEO of Carter Technologies. She was also my girlfriend, whom I had kept secret for 3 whole years. 3 years ago, when Victoria was a startup that had just secured angel investment, I worked day and night to help her write the core algorithm, even investing all my scholarship and part-time earnings into the company. Back then, she held my hand, tears welling in her eyes, and said I was the most important person in her life. But as Carter Technologies grew and its market value soared to billions of dollars, our relationship underwent a qualitative change. She became a high and mighty ice queen, while I was pushed into a dark basement by her own hand. At the company, I was an intern whose name wasn't even mentioned. In private, I was an appendage for her to vent her stress and emotional control. She wouldn't allow me to look at her in public, wouldn't allow me to contradict any of her decisions, and even took all the technical achievements I provided for granted, while claiming all the honors and shares for herself. Cole, stop pretending you can't hear me. The guests at that table over there need a fresh glass of champagne. Go and hurry up. Brian tapped the table with his finger impatiently, his tone condescending. If you spill even a drop, you can forget about your internship stipend this month. I took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the surging anger in my chest. I didn't explode on the spot, because I knew now wasn't the time. I picked up the tray and walked expressionlessly in the direction Brian had indicated. Just as I turned around, a dazzling spotlight suddenly illuminated the main stage at the front of the banquet hall. The melodious string music abruptly stopped, replaced by enthusiastic applause. Victoria, dressed in a haute couture white gown, slowly walked onto the stage. Her long chestnut hair was meticulously styled in a bun, and her exquisite makeup accentuated her cool and aloof face, making her resemble an untouchable Venus statue. Holding a microphone, she scanned the entire audience, her gaze finally settling precisely on me at the edge of the crowd. For a fleeting moment, a complex emotion flashed deep within her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by indifference. Thank you all for joining us for Carter Technologies' annual celebration tonight. Victoria's voice, clear and resonant, echoed throughout the hall through the top-of-the-line sound system. In the past year, our company not only completed its Series B funding round but also made groundbreaking progress in the field of artificial intelligence. All of this is inseparable from the efforts of every member of the team, especially my fiancé, Mr. Chad Locke. A thunderous applause erupted from the audience. When I heard the words fiancé, my heart clenched, as if an invisible hand had gripped my throat. Chad Locke, the only son of a long-established San Francisco real estate tycoon, was a typical playboy, dressed in a well-tailored Seville Row bespoke suit, a nonchalant smile playing on his lips. He rose from the first row of VIP seats, amidst the cheers of the crowd. He strode confidently onto the stage, naturally extending his arm to embrace Victoria's slender waist. Victoria frowned slightly, but didn't push him away. Instead, she leaned against his shoulder, a rare tenderness on her face. This scene hit me like a hammer blow to the chest. 3 years of secret relationship, 3 years of silent devotion, and all I got in return was this sudden, public execution tonight. I felt like a complete fool, kept in the dark, working like a dog to create wealth for them, while they got engaged in front of everyone, treating me like a joke to be summoned and dismissed at will. The guests below the stage began to whisper and discuss among themselves. My God, Victoria is actually marrying Chad. This is a powerful alliance. Carter Technologies' market value will at least double. I heard Chad has been pursuing Victoria relentlessly, showering her with luxury cars and yachts. This kind of business marriage is truly a match made in heaven. By the way, wasn't that in turn carrying the tray someone Victoria brought into the company? I heard they were quite close, and I thought there was something going on. But now it seems she's just a cheap, disposable lackey. The shrill whispers pierced my ears like needles. Brian, holding a wine glass, walked over, deliberately raising his voice, and said to me sarcastically, "Cole, did you hear that? This is real high society. Some people, no matter how much they try to get their hands on a swan, will only ever be fit to serve dishes in the audience. What is President Victoria's status? And what are you anyway? Know your place. And stop daydreaming about things that aren't yours." Brian's voice was loud, and several people around me turned to look at me, their eyes filled with mockery and ridicule. They were waiting to see me, this lowly intern, break down, lose control, and then flee the hall like a stray dog. I slowly raised my head, my gaze sweeping over the crowd and landing directly on Victoria in the center of the stage. Victoria happened to be looking at me too. Our eyes met, and a fleeting look of panic and probing flashed in her eyes, as if she were cruelly testing my limits, seeing just how much I could endure. She thought I would, like I had for the past 3 years, silently suffer any injustice, only to beg for her forgiveness in the end. Unfortunately, she miscalculated. Even a clay figure has some temper, let alone a man who holds the core technology that determines the company's survival. I didn't lower my head to wipe away tears as they expected, nor did I angrily slam the tray on the ground. Instead, I calmly placed the tray on the waiter's cart and picked up a glass of vintage champagne that I had originally intended for the VIP. I looked at Brian, whose face was full of astonishment, and a cold smile curled at the corner of my lips. "Director Brian, you're right. Some people really don't belong here." I looked him in the eye, my tone neither humble nor arrogant, my voice not loud but clearly reaching the ears of the people around me. However, it's too early to draw conclusions about who was the waiter and who was the last one to be kicked out. Brian was momentarily stunned by my sudden outburst. Then his face turned ashen, and he growled angrily, "How dare you, and in turn, talk to me like that? Believe me, I'll have security throw you out right now and make sure you never find a coding job in the entire Silicon Valley again." "You can try," I replied coldly, ignoring Brian's ashen face, and turned to down the champagne in my glass. Just then, Chad on stage grabbed the microphone and announced loudly with a condescending sense of superiority, "To celebrate my engagement to Victoria and to thank everyone for their support of Carter Technologies, all employees present tonight will receive an extra bonus. Of course, especially some of the lower-level interns. If they perform well tonight, I might even take pity on them and give them a decent resignation certificate." A burst of fawning laughter erupted from the audience. Victoria stood beside Chad, her brow furrowing slightly. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but ultimately remained silent, tacitly accepting Chad's humiliation. I stood in the shadows of the crowd, my fingers lightly touching the encrypted phone in my pocket. Just minutes before, a message had popped up on the screen from the assistant of legendary Silicon Valley investor Richard Wayne. "Mr. Cole, all the legal documents and funds are ready, and we can launch a short-selling attack on Carter Technologies at any time." Watching the two smug figures on stage, I sneered inwardly. "Victoria, Chad, enjoy this final moment of glory. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, I will make you watch as everything you've painstakingly built turns to ashes overnight." As I left the glamorous party at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, the night wind, carrying the damp chill characteristic of San Francisco, stung my face like a knife. Instead of taking a taxi, I pulled my faded jacket tighter around myself and walked alone down the steep slope back to my cramped shared apartment in South San Francisco. The room was pitch black, filled with the mixed smells of instant noodles and cheap coffee beans. It was a world apart from the luxurious crystal chandeliers of the Grand Hyatt Hotel. But looking at the dual-screen computer on the table, glowing with fluorescent light, I felt no inferiority whatsoever. Instead, I was filled with an almost morbid calmness. On the computer screen, the back-end monitoring interface of Carter Technologies' internal core server is displayed. Those long, dense strings of code, as vast as a galaxy, are the underlying algorithm of the Lynxy artificial intelligence, which I single-handedly typed out 3 years ago, working countless sleepless nights while suffering from severe stomach bleeding. At that time, Victoria had just graduated from Stanford Graduate School of Business, full of ambition to start her own tech company in Silicon Valley, but she couldn't even afford a decent full-stack engineer, and she even had to use my credit card to pay the deposit for renting servers. I willingly became her shadow. I not only shared all my professional skills with her without reservation, but also served as her driver, bodyguard, and even emotional dumping ground. I remember it was the first winter after we started our business, and it was pouring rain outside. Victoria broke down in tears in the office because of a cold shoulder from an investor. She smashed the coffee cup on the floor, the scalding liquid splashing all over me. She hysterically questioned me about why the company hadn't secured Series B funding, even calling me a useless coder. I didn't argue. I knelt down and carefully cleaned up the glass shards, letting the fragments cut my palms. Blood stained the carpet. She looked at my bleeding hands, a flicker of guilt in her eyes, then came over and hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder, her voice trembling with sobs. "Cole, I'm sorry. I'm under so much pressure. Don't leave me. When the company goes public, I'll give you everything in the world, and we'll get married." That cheap promise, like an invisible rope, bound me tightly to her side for 3 whole years. In those 3 years, Carter Technologies' valuation skyrocketed from a few $1 million to $2 billion. Victoria became a sought-after businesswoman on the cover of Silicon Valley magazines, hailed by the media as the ice queen of artificial intelligence. And me? On the company's roster, I was still just a technical intern receiving the minimum internship stipend and having to pay my own social security. Even more ridiculous, her controlling nature towards me was outrageous. She wouldn't allow me to say a word to any female colleague, wouldn't allow me to attend any industry gatherings, and even when I asked to become a full-time employee and receive even 1% of stock options, she would coldly question me. Cole, when did you become so mercenary? Is our relationship measured in money? The way you're acting now makes me feel you're very untrustworthy. While she enjoyed the enormous technological benefits I brought, she also used psychological manipulation to completely strip me of my dignity as an independent individual. She thought that as long as she kept me firmly under her feet, I would be like a dog that couldn't live without its master, forever wagging my tail and begging for mercy. It wasn't until tonight, when she stood under the spotlight arm in arm with Chad Locke, the only son of that real estate tycoon, and announced their engagement in such a grand manner, that I finally saw through this absurd drama she had orchestrated herself. It turns out that her so-called love and protection were nothing more than a cover to prevent me, the truly skilled but low-level employee, from leaving, thus solidifying her business empire. And when she had climbed into the arms of a truly wealthy family, and deemed me no longer of any use, she didn't hesitate to discard and humiliate me like a clown at a banquet. Knock, knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the old wooden door of the apartment. In the dead of night, no one would be coming to collect rent except from the landlord. I frowned slightly, got up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. Standing outside the door was not the landlord, but Jane, Victoria's personal secretary and the HR director of Carter Technology. I opened the door, and Jane's expensive cashmere coat contrasted sharply with the peeling paint of the dilapidated hallway. She crossed her arms and looked down at my small living room, her eyes revealing undisguised disgust and contempt. Cole, I never expected you to live in a place like this, but then again, with that little internship stipend you get, you can't even afford a decent studio apartment in San Francisco. Jane snorted and walked past me unceremoniously in her high heels, sitting down directly on the creaking plastic chair. I closed the door behind me, pulled up a chair and sat down opposite her. My tone so calm it surprised even myself. Director Jian, what brings you to the home of a poor intern like me in the middle of the night instead of celebrating your boss's engagement? Jane pulled a printed document from her elegant Hermes handbag, slammed it on the table, and said in a businesslike, arrogant tone, Cole, don't be sarcastic. Director Victoria, considering your past work in the company, specifically asked me to deliver this confidentiality agreement and resignation confirmation tonight. Tomorrow morning, go directly to the HR department to complete the formalities. You don't need to go to the R&D department anymore. I glanced at the document, which contained several shocking clauses. I must unconditionally relinquish all authorship rights and potential interests in the Lingxi AI algorithm, and I must not engage in any AI-related technical work for the next 5 years, or I will be liable for a huge compensation of up to $5 million. This is ruthless. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, looking up at Jane directly. Not only are they kicking me out of the company, but they're also ruining my entire life? Victoria really has a big hand. Jane frowned, seemingly quite displeased with my attitude, and her tone hardened. Cole, face reality. You're just a powerless, low-level intern, while Director Victoria is now the future heiress of the Chad family. Fighting them is like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, a suicide mission. This agreement not only includes a hefty hush money payment but also allows you to leave with dignity. If you insist on being ungrateful and anger young Master Chad, believe me, you won't be able to find a single meal in all of California. At that point, forget about coding. You might even be sleeping on the streets. Hearing Jane's blatant threat, the smile on my face gradually vanished, replaced by a chilling coldness. The arrogance of capital was on full display at that moment. They thought they could crush the dignity of a person from the bottom of society at will with money and power, and that everyone would tremble before brute force. Go back and tell Victoria. I slowly stood up, looking down at the astonished Jane, to take this document back intact. Also, I will be at the company at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. At that time, the person who needs to handle the formalities will not be me, but her. Jane was so intimidated by my imposing manner that she took a half step back, her face filled with disbelief. She probably never imagined that the intern who usually didn't dare to breathe loudly at the company, and was bossed around by her, would dare to speak to her with such eyes and tone tonight. Cole, are you crazy? Do you know who you're going against? Do you think you can change anything with your pathetic pride? Jane screamed in exasperation. Whether I'm crazy or not, you'll find out tomorrow. I walked to the door, pulled it open, and gestured for you to leave. Now, take your tattered paper and get out of my room. Otherwise, I don't mind having security escort you out. Jane was trembling with anger. She grabbed the documents on the table, glared at me fiercely, and said, Cole, you just wait. You'll be crying tomorrow. With that, she stormed out of the apartment in her high heels, which slammed loudly on the floor. As the door closed again, the room fell silent. I walked to the computer, the blue light of the screen reflecting on my face. I picked up the encrypted phone and dialed the number. The call was answered almost instantly, and a calm and authoritative voice came from the receiver. Mr. Cole, it seems you have made your decision? Yes, Mr. Richard, I said firmly, looking at the last line of code running on the screen. The real show will begin at tomorrow's board meeting. I want Carter Technologies to return everything they've swallowed. With interest. A deep, approving chuckle came from the other end of the phone. Very good. San Francisco's business world hasn't seen a true hunter in too long. Go, young man. I'll make the whole of Wall Street stand behind you. I hung up the phone, walked to the window, and looked at the twinkling lights in the direction of Victoria Manor in the distance. The night was deep, but I knew that my dawn was not far away. At 8 o'clock in the morning in San Francisco, the mist had not yet completely dissipated from the waters above the Golden Gate Bridge, but the underground parking garage of the Carter's Technology building was already full of all kinds of luxury cars. The air was filled with the aroma of premium coffee beans, and white-collar workers in well-tailored business suits hurriedly swiped their cards to enter. Starting a new work week, I parked my old Honda sedan in the most inconspicuous corner of the parking lot, opened the door, and got out. I was still wearing that faded jacket, but after the events of last night, my eyes no longer held the restraint and unease of the past. Instead, they were filled with an extreme calmness and a sense of control. Today is a crucial day for Carter Technologies to release its quarterly financial report and advance a new round of strategic restructuring. The entire management team and core technical staff will gather in the top-floor boardroom. According to Victoria's original plan, today is not only the day to officially announce her marriage to Chad, but also to pass a resolution at the board meeting to fully acquire the Linksy core algorithm. Of course, as a nominal intern, I don't even have the right to attend as an observer. I'm just assigned to the technical department to continue doing those low-tech coding chores. I had just reached the elevator when I ran into Robert, the director of the Technology Research and Development Department. Robert was holding a Starbucks and chatting quietly with his deputy. When he saw me, his smile vanished instantly, replaced by a condescending disdain. Hey, isn't this our Cole intern? Robert stopped and glanced at me sideways, his tone laced with undisguised mockery. Last night at the Grand Hyatt party, I heard you were spouting nonsense, even returning the resignation agreement that Director Jian sent you unopened? Cole, I really don't know where you get your confidence. Do you really think the company can't do without you just because you wrote a few lines of code for the R&D department? Several programmers passing by stopped when they heard the commotion, gathering around with amusement. In their eyes, I, an intern who sat in the corner all year round and didn't even have a formal employee badge, was nothing more than an ant that could be crushed at any moment. I didn't back down. I met Robert's gaze calmly and said, Director Robert, you should know better than anyone who has been working behind the scenes to fix the bugs in the Linksy algorithm from its first line of code to the current version iterations. To appropriate other people's hard work and even tamper with the contract is just too ugly. Hearing me bluntly expose the truth, Robert's expression changed drastically. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by rage. He slammed his coffee cup down on the nearby trash can, pointed at my nose, and said in a low, menacing voice, Cole, stop spouting nonsense. At Carter Technologies, the technology belongs to the company, and you're just a temporary worker on a salaried contract. Don't push your luck. Director Victoria doesn't have time for you today, but with just one word from me, you won't even get your internship certificate this month. Get out of Silicon Valley. You hear me? Make me get out of Silicon Valley? I sneered, taking a step forward. My powerful aura forced Robert to instinctively take a half step back. Robert, you'd better pray that everything goes smoothly at the board meeting today. Otherwise, the first person to get out of this company will probably be you, the kickback-taking director. Robert was trembling with rage, about to unleash a torrent of abuse, when the elevator doors dinged open. Victoria's personal secretary, Jane, stepped out in her high heels. Seeing the tense scene, her brow furrowed immediately, and she snapped coldly, What's all this noise about at the elevator entrance so early in the morning? What kind of behavior is this? Robert, the board meeting is about to begin, and Director Victoria is already waiting in the conference room. Why aren't you upstairs? Robert glared at me, straightened his suit and tie, and sneered, Director Jane, this kid's gone mad. Not only does he refuse to sign the resignation agreement, but he's also spouting nonsense and threatening the company's management. I don't think we need to wait until tomorrow. After the board meeting today, we should have security kick him out of the building. Jane turned her head, her gaze sharp as a knife as she looked at me, her eyes filled with disgust and impatience. Cole, I never expected you to be so tactless. Director Victoria has already been more than kind to you, giving you hush money, And you insist on making a scene here that makes everyone look bad. What good does that do you? Do you think you can stand up to the entire Carter Technologies on your own? Don't overestimate yourself. In Victoria's eyes, you're nothing more than a mark that can be erased at any time. Faced with Jane's sarcasm, I just smiled faintly, took out my phone from my pocket, and glanced at the time. Director Jane, instead of worrying about my future here, you should worry about how you will explain things to the shareholders at the board meeting later. Remember, some debts are not that they will not be settled, but that the time has not yet come. Jane snorted coldly, ignoring me, this madman, and led Robert straight into another private elevator. Seeing that no bigger conflict erupted, the surrounding employees shook their heads and dispersed, whispering amongst themselves about my utter ignorance. I stood still, took a deep breath, and then turned and walked into the regular employee elevator. As the elevator slowly ascended to the top-floor boardroom, through the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, one could see that the room was already filled with company executives and representatives from various investment institutions. Victoria sat regally at the center of the long table, dressed in a meticulously tailored black business suit, her chestnut hair impeccably styled, exuding a powerful, unapproachable queen-like aura. She was looking down at the documents in her hands, her brows slightly furrowed, as if waiting for something. Seated beside her was Chad Locke, with whom she had made a high-profile engagement the previous night. Chad wasn't wearing a suit, but rather a casual blazer, casually twirling an expensive pen in his hand, a confident, arrogant smile on his face. Instead of pushing the door open and going in, I found a corner lounge area to sit down and took out the encrypted phone. On the screen, an assistant to legendary Silicon Valley investor Richard Wayne had just sent a new confirmation message. Mr. Cole, all of Wayne Capital's funds have been secured, and the short-selling channel for Carter Technologies has officially opened. We can cut off their core funding chain at any time. Seeing this message, my smile grew even colder. Victoria, you probably thought today's board meeting was just a formality, a way to smoothly strip me of my expertise and then walk off to the pinnacle of your life with your wealthy fiancé. Too bad. You'll never know that the very foundation of this building has always been in the hands of me, the intern you've trampled underfoot. Around 9:30 a.m., the heavy mahogany doors of the conference room slowly opened, and the CFO, his face covered in cold sweat, strode out, carrying an urgent document and seemingly heading to find someone. I straightened my collar, calmly stood up, and walked steadily toward the closed conference room door. My moment of retaliation had finally begun. The air in the boardroom seemed to freeze, oppressively thick with tension. Representatives from various venture capital firms and company executives sat stiffly around the long mahogany conference table. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her face cool and confident, her Parker gold pen tapped rhythmically on the documents. Chad, sitting beside her, leaned back in his chair, a triumphant, playful smile playing on his lips, as if this meeting was merely a victory ceremony for them. So, if there are no other objections, the resolution regarding Carter Technologies' full acquisition of the Linksy algorithm and the complete termination of the contracts of the relevant intern technicians will now be put to a vote by show of hands. Victoria's voice was clear and firm, echoing in the empty conference room, brooking no argument. Just as several executives were about to raise their hands, the heavy double doors of the conference room were suddenly pushed open from the outside. The heavy thud shattered the silence inside, and everyone's eyes turned to the doorway. I stood at the door, ignoring the astonished looks around me, and strode confidently inside. I was still wearing that faded jacket, which made me stand out starkly against the backdrop of the suit-clad elites in the luxurious conference room. Cole, what are you doing here? Who let you in? Victoria's face instantly darkened, her brows furrowing tightly, a flash of offended anger in her eyes. Jane, standing beside her, immediately stood up and snapped. Cole, are you crazy? This is the core boardroom, not a place for a lowly intern like you to act recklessly. Security, throw this arrogant brat out immediately. Several security personnel who rushed over after hearing the commotion stepped forward and reached out to grab my shoulder. I didn't even lift my eyelids, just gave them a cold glance, then pulled a document stamped with the official seal of the San Francisco Superior Court from my pocket and casually slammed it onto the center of the long table. Wait a minute, I said coldly, my voice not loud but with an irresistible penetrating force. All the directors here, if you don't want your tens of millions of dollars worth of stock to become worthless this afternoon, you'd better read this document carefully before deciding whether to kick me out. A murmur rippled through the conference room. A senior independent director, seated at the back, frowned, glanced at the document, and his expression changed drastically. This is an asset freeze order? Carter Technologies' core underlying architecture code actually has independent intellectual property rights for third-party legal action. Victoria's expression changed drastically. She stood up abruptly, a flicker of panic crossing her delicate face, which she quickly suppressed. She strode to the table, grabbed the legal document, and stared intently at the clauses. Her voice sharpened. Cole, what are you doing? The ownership of the Linksy Algorithm was transferred internally 3 years ago through an internal agreement. Don't even think about forging documents to falsely accuse the company. An internal transfer agreement? I chuckled dismissively, pulled out a chair, and sat down with a flourish, staring directly at Victoria. Victoria, you've probably forgotten that 3 years ago, to save the initial tens of thousands of dollars in patent registration fees, I registered the underlying architecture of that core algorithm separately in my own name with the Federal Copyright Office. In other words, Carter Technology still doesn't have complete commercial exclusive rights to Linksy. You've been engaging in commercial infringement all along. These words caused an uproar. Representatives from various investment institutions immediately became restless, whispering among themselves, their faces showing fear and anger. For a technology company whose core selling point is artificial intelligence, the existence of copyright disputes and infringement risks regarding its core algorithm is a devastating blow. Chad, who was sitting next to Victoria, couldn't sit still any longer. He slammed his hand on the table, stood up abruptly, pointed at my nose, and started yelling. Who do you think you are? Just a lowly intern on a meager stipend. And you dare to spout nonsense and disrupt the board of directors? Victoria, don't waste your breath on this desperate guy. Just call the police and have him arrested for commercial extortion. Looking at Chad's furious face, I shook my head with a cold smile. Young Master Chad, what's the rush? Does being the son of a real estate tycoon give you the right to disregard the law and trample on other people's hard work? Are you in such a hurry to endorse Carter Technology because your family's real estate fund has recently injected a large sum of money into Carter Technology, hoping to use it as a backdoor listing to launder money? Chad's face turned deathly pale instantly, and his finger pointing at me trembled violently. What nonsense are you talking about? Whether I'm lying or not, you can ask the CFO. I turned to the CFO, who was sitting in the corner, sweating profusely. Carter Technology inflated its revenue by 40% last month through related party transactions to embellish its financial statements and prepare for its Series B funding round. Right. The CFO was so frightened that his body went limp, and he even dropped his water glass. He stammered, unable to utter a complete sentence. Victoria, seeing the questioning and suspicious gazes of the investors around her, swayed slightly and nearly fell if she hadn't grabbed the table for support. She never imagined that this intern, who was usually so meek and subservient in front of her, would secretly possess all the company's fatal dirt and core evidence. Victoria, I said, my smile vanishing, my gaze sharp as I pierced the once aloof Ice Queen. 3 years ago, when you were heartbroken and weeping after your business failed, I gave you all my assets and technology. But how did you repay me? You treated me like a tool to be summoned and dismissed at will, even publicly humiliating me at last night's party. Did you really think I would just accept this? Just then, a small LCD TV screen in the corner of the conference room suddenly lit up, displaying an emergency live broadcast from a leading San Francisco financial media outlet. The anchor, with a grave expression, reported a breaking news story. Breaking news from our station. Carter Technologies, a star company in Silicon Valley, has just been targeted by an emergency short-selling attack jointly launched by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and legendary Silicon Valley investor Richard Wayne, due to allegations of serious financial fraud and infringement of core algorithm intellectual property rights. Carter Technologies' pre-market stock price has already plummeted by 60%, and numerous investment institutions are preparing a class action lawsuit. Upon seeing this news, the investment representatives in the conference room completely broke down. Several hot-tempered directors slammed the documents they were holding onto the table, pointed at Victoria's nose, and roared, Victoria, you must give us a reasonable explanation. If the copyright and fraud issues cannot be resolved today, we will immediately withdraw our investment and file for bankruptcy liquidation. Victoria stared blankly at the plummeting stock price on the screen, then turned to look at me, her eyes filled with despair and disbelief. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something to beg for mercy, but amidst the angry accusations from the audience, she ultimately kept those words to herself. I slowly stood up, looking down at Victoria, whose face was deathly pale, and said in a calm but cold tone, This is just the beginning. Victoria, your good days are completely over. Inside the boardroom on the top floor of the Carter Technologies building, the air seemed to freeze. The sunlight outside was blindingly bright, but it offered no warmth to Victoria's pale face. Representatives from several major venture capital firms had already stormed off, leaving behind only cold lawyers' letters and withdrawal notices. The LCD TV on the table continued to broadcast the alarming figures of Carter Technologies' pre-market stock price plummeting. Each percentage point drop felt like a dull knife, slowly cutting a chunk of flesh from Victoria's business empire, painstakingly built over years. Chad's previously nonchalant and arrogant demeanor had vanished without a trace. He slumped dejectedly into his leather chair, his expensive custom-made suit and tie askew, a fine layer of sweat beading on his forehead. His family's real estate fund was now under urgent investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for allegedly illegally transferring profits to Carter Technologies. His father's secretary had just made 3 frantic phone calls, practically roaring on the other end, ordering him to immediately return to family headquarters for questioning. Young Master Chad, it seems your grand pronouncements on stage just now sound like a brilliant piece of dark humor. I walked unhurriedly to Chad's side, my hands in the pockets of my faded jacket, looking down at him. Why aren't you laughing anymore? Where did that condescending air you had at the party go? Chad jerked his head up, his eyes bloodshot, filled with terror and venom. He gritted his teeth and forced out the words. Cole, you spineless, low-life scum. How dare you frame us? Do you know who you're messing with? Killing you is as easy as crushing an ant for me. Crush me to death? I chuckled contemptuously, grabbing Chad's expensive solid gold pen from the table and twirling it casually between my fingers. Chad, open your eyes and see clearly who's being crushed right now. Your family's real estate fund will have all its liquid assets frozen tomorrow due to illegal related party transactions. As for you, as the person primarily responsible, get ready to face an FBI investigation into economic crimes. You still want to kill me? You can't even pull yourself out of your own quagmire right now. Upon hearing the words FBI, Chad's face instantly turned from pale to ashen, and his body trembled violently. He opened his mouth, wanting to utter a harsh remark, but found his throat felt constricted, and he couldn't utter a single word. He frantically grabbed his coat and scrambled out of the conference room, even stumbling at the doorway, looking as pathetic as a stray dog. With Chad's hasty escape, only Victoria and I, along with a few executives huddled nervously in the corner, remained in the spacious conference room. Victoria slowly rose from her seat. Her black business suit, which had once captivated countless Silicon Valley elites, now seemed utterly empty, and her chestnut hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She walked towards me step by step, the sound of her high heels clicking on the floor echoing sharply in the empty room, each step heavy with weariness. Cole. Victoria's voice was terribly hoarse, all traces of her usual coldness and arrogance gone, replaced by a trembling voice that sounded almost pleading. All of this, did you really do it? You spent 3 years just for this moment? I stopped and turned to face her. That once refined and aloof face was now etched with disbelief and deep regret. 3 years ago, when she stood before me with her first meager startup capital, I thought I had found love and my entire future. But reality slapped me hard in the face, making me realize that in the eyes of some sophisticated egoists, companionship and sacrifice are nothing more than consumables to be exploited and discarded at will. Victoria, there's one thing you still don't understand. I took a step closer, my powerful aura forcing her to involuntarily take a half step back. It wasn't me who was meticulously plotting against you. It was you who handed me the knife. 3 years ago, I typed out the code for the Linksy algorithm line by line, and I scraped together the initial funding for the company for you by scrimping and saving. I treated you as my only support. But you treated me as a stepping stone that you could trample on at any time. Victoria's eyes instantly reddened, tears welling up but stubbornly refusing to fall. Her voice trembled with sobs as she screamed hysterically. I admit I've been a bit harsh on you. I admit I hid our relationship for the company's financing. But Cole, didn't I promise to marry you in the end? Once the company goes public, we'll have all of this. Why couldn't you wait for me a little longer? Why did you have to push me to the brink? Hearing her self-righteous and sophistical questioning, I couldn't help but sneer. It was utterly ridiculous. Even now, she still felt her betrayal and hurt were perfectly justified, while my resistance was seen as an unforgivable sin. Marry me? I looked at her coldly. Under the spotlight of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, in front of all of San Francisco's high society, you were arm in arm with another man, getting engaged in a high-profile manner, making me the biggest clown in the room for everyone to laugh at. Why didn't you say you would marry me then? In your subconscious, I was only fit to be the intern who hid in the dark corner and cleaned up your messes. And I didn't deserve to stand in the sunlight. Victoria, stop with your hypocritical tears. They disgust me. Victoria felt as if she had been struck by a heavy hammer. Her body swayed violently, and she almost fell. She closed her eyes in pain, and 2 streams of tears finally slid down her delicate cheeks. She took a deep breath, her voice almost a whisper. So, you rejected the resignation agreement last night, and today you're coming in with the court's freezing order and Richard Wayne's capital, just to leave me with nothing. Isn't that right? No, this is just interest. I suppressed my sneer, my tone as calm as a deep pool. Carter Technologies is now insolvent. Legendary Silicon Valley investor Richard Wayne has acquired all of the company's core debt. Starting this afternoon, this company will no longer be owned by Carter, and I will become its new owner. Victoria suddenly opened her eyes, staring intently at me, a final struggle and despair flashing in them. She abruptly took a large step forward. Then, without any dignity, her knees buckled, and she knelt straight down at my feet. Cole, I'm begging you. Victoria grabbed the hem of my faded jacket, tears streaming down her face, her voice shrill and desperate. I know I've wronged you. I shouldn't have betrayed you. Shouldn't have humiliated you in public. If you just stop shorting the company, if you just let Carter Technologies go, I'd do anything you ask. I'd transfer all my shares to you. I'd be your secretary, your subordinate. I'd even break off my engagement with Chad tonight. And we could start over. Okay? Please, for the sake of the past 3 years. Save Carter Technologies. Seeing this once arrogant Silicon Valley businesswoman kneeling at my feet, weeping like a stray dog without shelter, I felt no pleasure. Only a cold indifference born of a profound understanding of the absurdity of life. I slowly bent down, reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look directly at me. Victoria, I looked at you like this 3 years ago when you were cleaning up the coffee cup I smashed in your office. I said to her, word by word. Back then, I told you that people always have to pay the price for their arrogance. Unfortunately, you thought I was talking nonsense. After saying that, I ruthlessly shook off her hand and stood up straight. I casually pulled out a few clean tissues and threw them on the table, looking down at her slumped on the floor. Get up, Victoria. This is the boardroom, not a stage for your self-pity act. I coldly straightened my collar. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Carter Technologies will hold an extraordinary general meeting of shareholders, at which time asset restructuring and personnel appointments and removals will be announced. I hope you can attend in a presentable manner and personally hand over the CEO's seal. After saying that, I didn't look at her again, turned around and walked steadily out of the meeting room. The heavy mahogany door slowly closed behind me, completely shutting out Victoria's desperate cries from inside. I took out my phone, and a new message from Richard Wayne popped up on the screen. Mr. Cole, the acquisition process is going smoothly. We will hand over the work at 2 p.m. in the president's office on the top floor. I looked out the window at the gradually clearing San Francisco sky and took a deep breath. My era has only just begun. The afternoon sun at 2 o'clock streamed through the huge floor-to-ceiling windows of the CEO's office on the top floor of Carter Technologies, illuminating the entire room. Outside, the city streets of San Francisco stretched out in a picturesque panorama, with the shimmering bay in the distance. Behind the large mahogany desk that once belonged to Victoria Carter, sat Richard Wayne, the legendary Silicon Valley investor. At this moment, I pushed open the heavy solid wood door of the office and went inside. Richard put down the documents in his hand, looked up at me, and a smile of appreciation appeared on his weathered face. He stood up and extended his right hand to me across the desk. Mr. Cole, congratulations. Starting this afternoon, the true owner of this company has officially changed hands. I shook Richard's hand, my tone calm and steady. Thank you, Mr. Richard. Without your capital, this battle wouldn't have been fought so well. No, capital is always just a tool. What truly brings down an elephant is a hunter's precise marksmanship and absolute patience. Richard smiled and shook his head, casually pushing a brand new equity transfer agreement and personnel appointment letter in front of me. Carter Technologies' board of directors unanimously passed the restructuring resolution half an hour ago, and the original management team has been completely purged. As for Victoria, she's waiting for you in her temporary office downstairs, saying she wants to see you one last time. I stared at the appointment letter on the table, a symbol of absolute control, which clearly read CEO and CTO. Cole Sterling. 3 years ago, I was a lowly employee, barely scraping by and receiving a meager internship stipend, even struggling to secure a permanent position. Now, I had the entire company under my thumb, the rightful ruler. Let her come up, I said calmly, withdrawing my gaze. Okay, I'll wait for you in the conference room next door. Call me anytime if you need anything. Richard patted my shoulder, turned and walked out of the office, closing the door behind him. About 10 minutes later, there was a gentle knock on the office door, and then the door was pushed open a crack from the outside. Victoria stood in the doorway. She had changed out of her signature black business suit and was wearing a simple beige trench coat. Her long hair was loosely draped over her shoulders, and she wore no elaborate makeup. The once aloof and powerful ice queen of Silicon Valley now looked somewhat aged and haggard. Standing by the door, she seemed to need all her strength to even step into the office. I didn't say anything. I just leaned back in the leather swivel chair, my hands folded in front of my knees, and looked at her coldly. Victoria took a deep breath and slowly walked in. She looked around the office that once belonged to her but had now completely changed hands, her eyes filled with bitterness and absurdity. She walked to the desk, looked at me across the wide surface, her lips trembling slightly, and after a long while, she spoke in a hoarse voice. Cole, I never thought that you would be the one to win in the end. Yes, in your eyes, I'm just an intern who can only hide in the basement writing code. Someone you can call on and dismiss at will. How could I possibly win? I said sarcastically. Unfortunately, the world is full of arrogant arrogance. Victoria, when you brought Chad to the party to publicly show off your love and humiliate me in front of everyone, you should have known this day would come. Upon hearing Chad's name, Victoria trembled violently, a flash of despair and hatred crossing her eyes. That bastard Chad. After the family went bankrupt, He abandoned me the moment he saw me, even pinning all the blame for the company's previous irregularities on me. He doesn't love me at all. He only loves himself. Isn't this your own choice? I ruthlessly shattered her excuse. You coveted the Chad family's reputation and capital in the real estate industry, thinking that I, a poor boy, couldn't provide the luxurious life you wanted, while enjoying the core algorithm I worked day and night to develop for you. You were having an affair with other men, and even took it for granted that I would always fawn over you like a dog. Victoria, you are the one who betrayed our relationship. You are the one who was blinded by greed. And now you've ended up like this. What right do you have to complain about others? Victoria turned pale at my barrage of cold words, staggered back a step, and slammed her back against the bookshelf behind her. Several books slipped from the shelf, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. She slowly crouched down, hugged her knees, and tears that had been held back for so long finally streamed down her face. Her shoulders heaved violently as she let out a desperate sob. Cole, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Victoria raised her tear-streaked face, her voice almost pleading. For the past 3 years, I've actually had feelings for you. I admit I was blinded by fame and fortune. But Carter Technologies is the culmination of my hard work. It's my life. Please, give the company back to me. Or even just let me stay and work for you. Just say the word, and I'll do anything. Let's start over. Okay? Looking at this woman who was once high and mighty, now utterly broken and weeping, I felt no pity, only a triumphant satisfaction at finally getting revenge after overcoming countless obstacles. The saddest thing in the world of emotions isn't the lack of love, but taking someone's deep affection for granted as a stepping stone. When she pulled the knife on me, she should have known she would be betrayed one day. I stood up from my chair, walked around the desk, and stood in front of her, looking down at her. Victoria, stop with your cheap tears. They won't bring back Carter Technology, nor will they earn you any sympathy. I looked at her coldly. 3 years ago, when I handed over all my savings and technology to you without reservation, you looked down at me with the same condescension. Back then, I was 10 times more desperate than you are now. I pulled out a pre-prepared equity divestiture and resignation agreement from my pocket and casually tossed it onto the carpet at her feet. This is your termination agreement. Starting today, you will be completely removed from Carter Technology, and all your shares will be wiped out as civil damages for your alleged illegal financial fraud and commercial infringement. Considering the past 3 years, I haven't had the Economic Crime Investigation Department handcuff you and take you away directly. That's already giving you the utmost respect. Victoria stared blankly at the cold agreement on the carpet, as if all the strength had been drained from her body in an instant. She knew she had lost completely, utterly and utterly, her last shred of dignity crushed. Trembling, she reached out to pick up the agreement, but she couldn't grasp the edge of the paper. After you sign, take your things and leave. I didn't look at her again, turned my back to her, and said, there are moving companies waiting for your personal belongings outside. Remember, never appear in my sight again. After saying that, I ignored Victoria, who was slumped on the carpet and sobbing uncontrollably, and went straight back to my desk, sitting down and turning on my computer screen again. On the screen, Carter Technologies, stock price, supported by its new technical architecture, was steadily recovering at an astonishing pace in after-hours trading. A few minutes later, hurried footsteps sounded outside the door. 2 security guards walked in expressionlessly, lifted the distraught, tearful Victoria from the floor, and half-dragged, half-carried her out of the office. The heavy solid wood door closed again, shutting out those unbearable memories of the past and her hysterical cries. I picked up the warm black coffee on the table, took a small sip, and gazed at the brilliant sunset outside the window. My new era has firmly taken hold. The San Francisco Convention Center in downtown San Francisco was ablaze with lights, hosting the annual Silicon Valley Technology Summit and Outstanding Young Entrepreneur Awards ceremony tonight. The entire convention center was packed, with flashes from top tech giants, venture capitalists, and major media outlets creating a dazzling sea of light. A few months ago, this was a replica of the Grand Hyatt Hotel where Victoria announced her engagement in a high-profile manner and made a laughingstock of me. But tonight, the person standing in the center of this highest-level technology stage in the United States to give a speech is me, Cole Sterling, the current CEO of Carter Technologies. I stood before a massive holographic projection screen, dressed in a meticulously tailored Tom Ford bespoke suit. The screen displayed the next-generation AI system architecture of Linksy, which I had spearheaded in its development and complete upgrade. Below me sat thousands of industry elites, including many partners from major venture capital firms who had once mocked me at board meetings but now eagerly vied for a handshake with me in the front row. Seated in the very center of the VIP section in the first row was Richard Wayne, the legendary Silicon Valley investor who had consistently provided me with unwavering support. He slightly raised his champagne glass to me, a smile of approval on his face. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. My voice, delivered through the top-of-the-line speakers, resonated throughout the entire exhibition hall. Steady, powerful, and carrying an undeniable sense of control. 3 years ago, when this company was just starting out, many people thought that the technical staff who climbed up from the bottom were only fit to remain in the shadows forever. But today, history has proven that true core value is always in the hands of those who have weathered storms, truly understand core technologies, and persevere. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Flashbulbs went off like crazy, forever freezing my upright figure on the front page of major financial media outlets. In the most secluded and darkest corner of the convention center stood a figure in a faded, out-of-season beige trench coat. That was Victoria. She had lost all her shares and management control of Carter Technologies. Her assets were frozen by the court to pay off debts, and even her former fiancé, Chad, had quickly severed ties with her after his family's bankruptcy, pinning all the charges of commercial fraud on her alone. To get a ticket to tonight's tech summit, she had to grovel and beg her former colleagues for a long time, hiding in the shadows like a true vagrant. Her face was haggard, her hair dry and disheveled. The haughty and aloof demeanor of her former CEO was gone. She stared intently at the radiant, star-studded man in the center of the stage, her eyes filled with endless regret, pain, and despair. Only today did she truly understand what a truly powerful and upright man she had abandoned. After the speech, the entire audience stood up and applauded. I calmly walked off the stage, and amidst a throng of media cameras and microphones, headed towards the VIP lounge. Just as I was passing by the side corridor, a thin figure suddenly staggered out of the shadows and knelt down at my feet with a thud. "Cole, please, for the sake of the past 3 years, save me." Victoria looked up, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she tried to grab the hem of my suit jacket. Her voice was hoarse and barely audible. "I have nothing now, the house has been foreclosed. All my friends are avoiding me. I don't even have enough money for tomorrow. Cole, I know I wronged you before. I was blind. I brought this on myself. Please, give me some shares. Or even just let me go back to the company as a lowly intern. Just say the word." I stopped and looked down at this woman who had once been high and mighty, but was now as pathetic as a stray dog. The security personnel around her immediately surrounded her, reaching out to try and pull her away. I raised my hand, signaling the security personnel to step back. Then, I slowly crouched down to meet her gaze. Looking at her face, etched with despair and pleading, I felt no emotion, only a calm that comes from having weathered countless storms. "Victoria," I said calmly, my voice not loud but clear enough to reach her ears. 3 years ago, when I knelt on the ground cleaning up the coffee cup you smashed and begged you to give me a little more respect, how did you treat me? You said I was a poor, inexperienced intern who could only write code and didn't deserve to stand by your side. Victoria's body trembled violently. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her lips trembled, unable to utter a word. "You enjoyed all the effort I put into you, yet you trampled on my dignity in the cruelest way, even making me a laughingstock and publicly humiliating me at our engagement party." I stood up, straightened my suit and tie, and looked down at her, who was slumped on the ground. "People always have to pay the price for their arrogance and betrayal. Everything you've lost today is nothing more than the bitter fruit of your past actions." After saying that, I didn't look at her again, turned around, and strode confidently into the brightly lit VIP lounge without looking back. The heavy wooden doors slowly closed behind me, completely shutting out Victoria's desperate sobs. The night was deep, and the San Francisco Bay Area lights twinkled outside my window, the sea breeze ruffling the steel structure of the Golden Gate Bridge. I raised a glass of vintage champagne, gazing at the vibrant cityscape, my mind crystal clear. My new life was just beginning. And thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.